Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Runeterra Report, Mastering Runeterra's weekly podcast filling you in on everything that you'll need to know for the upcoming week of Runeterra at a breakneck pace. I'm your host, Darwintheory, NA Masters player and two-time Seasonals attendee, here to guide you through the meta for the week of January 9th, 2022. Without any further ado, let's dive right in and explore what you'll have to keep an eye on for this week of Runeterra. And we have a new meta at hand, folks. For the first time in weeks, Big Red has been dethroned. The new most dominant deck in the meta has to be Lulu Jinx right now, since its main predator, that being Aatrox, has been nerfed out of relevance, crushing the other 5 most popular decks with unreal win rates while also dominating much of the fringes. The Yordle and Megalomaniac are running rampant through the meta with a 57% win rate. There's still quite limited room for experimentation in the decklist, it's just as tight as it was last week, but, like I said before, single copies of Augmented Experimenter and Electro Harpoon are doing very well. I'd recommend making room to try one of each in your list. For the time being, it looks like we have a new meta tyrant who doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. And in an unexpected blast from the past that we'll see a lot more of today, another old archetype returns to the top. Trundle Tryndamere Feel the Rush is performing well, even with its main prey, Bandlebar, mostly out of the picture. It crushes the up-and-comer Nora Veigar, obliterates several of the old meta-tyrants, and stands a reasonable chance in most of its losing matchups. Wild Mysticism is the way to go, folks. The deck is including the ramp card far more often than it used to, but if you still aren't running 3 copies, I would implore you to change your mind. It works wonders. I've seen it firsthand. A single copy of Voices of the Old Ones is a greedy option that's also just risen to popularity recently, and I would highly recommend including it in your list as well if you're still on an older version. Since Bandlebar's dethroning, Feel the Rush is decisively the new top combo control deck in the game, and you should be abusing it if that's your playstyle. I don't quite understand the Lurk phenomenon, but this archetype continues to surprise me as it rises in popularity. I usually avoid talking about archetypes that have really mediocre win rates outside of the Radioactive Hazard Pile segment, and Lurk has been fitting the bill of middling unimpressive archetype for weeks now, but it's skyrocketed to the 3rd most played archetype in the game. Terrible win rates against Jinx, Lulu, and Red Gwen, but it stands a good chance against Feel the Rush, and it does run through several of the older meta-tyrants. There are many viable Lurk versions that very slightly tweak your non-Lurk cards, but the best versions right now seem to be running 1 Chamber of Renewal, since both your champions benefit heavily from the attack bonus and spell shield, and 2 Aspiring Chronomancers is an easy way to trigger early Lurks, just like Forsaken Bakai. Keep your non-Lurk cards to a minimum, though. You don't want to miss it too often. I don't have an awful lot of faith in this archetype, honestly, but the player base seems to love it, and the word of the people does reign supreme when it comes to play rate on ladder. And for another deck that just might not ever fall out of relevance, Red Gwen is still kicking at number 4 most played in the meta with a very respectable win rate. Dominates Lurk and cleans out several of the weaker options while going even with Feel the Rush, but it does lose hard to Jinx Lulu and a few of the newer up-and-comers. I hate to sound like a broken record week after week, but my suggestions on this archetype might never change, unless you meatheads start listening up, that is. Start including Crimson Pigeon, Mark of the Isles, and Legion Rearguard if you aren't playing them. The early power that those 1-drops and that spell bring this deck can't be denied. Most of the other options here are too fringe to really consider by play rate, but Rune Squire does look like an interesting 2-of, and we've seen it work in the past in Rumble Vein as well. The card is strong. Red Gwen has definitely fallen from its peak as the undisputed best several months ago, but it's without a doubt a solid option for anyone who loves swinging with big hallowed units and kicking ass among the less played fringe options. And for the first time in a long time, Veigar's viable again. Senna is still sad, however, since Nora seems to be the diminutive Lord of Evil's new best partner. They crush most of the tyrants of the meta, only really losing to Feel the Rush, Sundisk, and the rapidly falling Aatrox Quinvane among meta decks. The list still needs plenty of extra refinement and experimentation to be complete, but single copies of the Box and Wallop have historically been very good, and the stats are backing it up right now. See what you can do with this archetype, since experimentation is allowed and encouraged in such a deck list. For the old Darkness lovers, or the Nora Shadow Isles control lovers of more recent times, Nora Veigar has everything you could feasibly want, and a fantastic matchup spread to boot. Give it a try, you'll be impressed. And while Lulu is undoubtedly the best Jinx partner in the game right now, we've also seen the return of Ekko Jinx, a deck that rapidly blows its hand to level both champions and abuse their powerful level 2 effects. does excellently against 3 of the 4 new meta kings, stands its ground against Field of Rush, and only loses to Nora Veigar among popular decks right now. The deck list is relatively tight, but I would highly recommend running 2 copies of Voice of the Risen if you aren't one of the many players doing so already. It's trivially easy to level up your champs, and that +2 power is tremendously useful on a bunch of little units. Forge Chief is also a great 1-drop, giving you more mana to spend on predicting and emptying your hand. For particularly explosive combos, this deck is an absolute treat, and I would highly recommend giving it a shot. Another old dog that never seems to want to lay down and die, Plunder has made its return to the meta in a very promising state. Obliterates Lurk with some ridiculous odds, pummels Red Gwen, and stands its ground against the other top dogs. Loses to some up-and-comers though, so I would be careful about assuming that the plundering pair are here to stay for sure. Katarina, Leona, and Nora Veigar are both gaining traction at a crazy pace, and they'll be very effective answers if Plunder does rise to the top of the meta. Babbling Bjerg has historically been a champ tutor in this deck, and I would highly recommend it right now, especially if you're targeting lurkers. Drawing a leveled champ is enough to just insta-win many situations against that deck, in particular leveled Sejuani, since they don't really have a way to push through lethal outside of the board. Three Sisters is another card that does a great job of shutting down lurks, since Frostbites will ruin Rek'Sai's level up before she's allowed to get her attack off. I also like 1 copy of Field Rush, and I've seen this Blood in the Water thing a few times on ladder as well. It might be worth including to help close out games, especially with a leveled Gangplank. If your pocket meta's full of Lurk, this is without a single doubt the best meta option to shut them down. Make sure you have it in your back pocket so you can be prepared when the sharks begin to circle. And it seems like it might be about time to discuss those Noxus Aggro decks from last week. I've soured a lot on Elise Gwen, since its main predator is the new best deck in the game. Lulu Jinx has a 10% play rate, and this is one of the most lopsided matchups in the entire game right now. This is basically auto-lose for Elise Gwen. Unless you're really partial to this deck, I would stick to Discard or Pirates. They have similar matchup spreads. Both crush Lurkers, Ephemerals, Sundisk Worshippers, and Tumbling Rumbles, while getting blasted by Jinx Lulu, Plunder, and Nora Veigar. The real difference comes in the Field Rush and Red Gwen matchups. Pirates crushes both of them, whereas Discard is slightly unfavored in both. The only real reason to play Discard over Pirates is if you're an aggro aficionado and your meta is full of Aatrox, since Discard does retain a good win rate against Big Red, where Pirates falls short. Discard also stands slightly more of a chance against Jinx Lulu, but you really probably shouldn't be playing either of these decks if you're running into that matchup a lot. It's just brutal either way. Discard is no longer doing well with Reveler's Feast and builds a lot more like a classic Noxus Aggro. Pirates loves Feast, performs well with Double Up and Island Navigator, and for some reason is still running Voodoo Cultist? I really just see this as a worse Jagged Butcher, since it's coming down as a vanilla 2-2 in most deck lists that don't have equipment. Like, seriously, where are these players getting their equipment? It's not Hookmaster. That card sucks in this deck. But surely the sauce behind this will eventually be revealed, because this win rate can't be a fluke in almost 400 games. I'm a bit lower on Noxus Aggro this week than I was last week, because Jinx Lulu is such a tyrant, but those decks can still absolutely clean house in some popular matchups, and they are worth trying. And speaking of the Noxus Bilgewater pairing, we've actually seen a peculiar old friend pop up thanks to its very favorable win rates among the top dogs. Swain TF gets absolutely eviscerated by Field Rush in a near auto-lose matchup, but it crushes Lulu Jinx, Lurkers, Red Gwen, and several other popular decks in the process. This deck is super polarizing right now, and you have to be careful about when you pick it up, but it could yield some ridiculous LP gains if Jinx Lulu and Lurkers are your local meta tyrants. Legionary Charge is an ingenious little trick to draw the Leviathan or Riptide Rex to help you close out the game, and I think it'll likely go up in play rate as players realize how critical it can be to draw those win cons. It's also nice to have a 2-mana draw 1 to help TF level in the rare games where that's a possibility, or even to buff up his power with Quick Attack to take an unexpected favorable trade. Piltover Castaway and Coral Creatures are also solid early drops to give you back a little bit of mana to spend on your damage spells, and I'm actually a huge fan of this Ruined Reckoner inclusion. Ever since they buffed Swain to have Overwhelm at level 2, the card has been a super underrated in-region addition to Swain decks that lets you pressure with his terrifying Nexus Strike effect 2 times in 1 turn, or to get a free attack off even after he's been stunned. All in all, a deck with a few really neat little inclusions that's dominating some of the strongest decks in the game right now. Just don't play it when you keep running into Field Rush, I beg of you. This is ridiculous. 26? Come on. And for the last deck I'll be mentioning in a positive light today, we have, Katarina Leona? Yeah, you heard that right. Shoutouts to Trinithan for this unholy concoction of big stats, which has taken the ladder by storm with an absolutely silly win rate. This thing keeps picking up traction more and more by the minute, too. Fun fact, it actually went up several spots on this Mastering Runeterra meta list while I was sitting here writing the script. Obliterates Feel the Rush, Red Gwen, Lurkers, Sundisk, and Ephemerals, 5 of the most popular decks in the game right now, all with obscene 65+% win rates. Are you kidding me? And it kind of stands its ground against the very popular Jinx Lulu and growing Nora Veigar as well. Not great matchups, but I mean, like, seriously, do you see these winning matchups? Because it's so new, though, I can't see that much in terms of stats for best inclusions. It's really just one deck list performing very well. It seems really tight for the moment, but I would recommend using the net deck as a base and experimenting for yourself as we discover what's strong with the deck. This thing is looking stupid strong, and if the meta stays the way it is, I doubt it's going anywhere anytime soon. And while there are plenty of new, good archetypes, and yeah, that's very exciting and all, it's not all happy sunshines and rainbows in Card Gameville. There are some archetypes that just capital S suck, and that's what this segment's for. Welcome back, everyone, to the Radioactive Hazard Pile. We should start off with a trio of familiar faces. Sundisk, Ephemerals, and every Rise deck. Just stop embarrassing yourselves. The fact that Sundisk and Ephemerals consistently stay within the top 10 play rate is indicative of just how fun the decks are, because the stats are just awful. They only ever have at most one winning matchup among the top few decks, and in this case they both get embarrassed to a hilarious degree by the new king, Lulu Jinx. Rise just loses to everything. Bard Kale still sucks too, nothing new to see here. Please stop playing Azir Zolani. You're diluting my lovely, wonderful stats. You're handing out free LP to anyone who will accept it. Please. I mean it, I'm begging you guys. Everyone's win rate is like 2% higher because we're still playing this. Annie Jin is still tremendously underwhelming. I don't really see any reason to play it over any other Noxus Aggro. Rumble Vayne lost its main target, that was Big Red, and now faces a slew of bad matchups, meaning that the world's angriest Mecha Yordle might have to sit down for a sec and chill out. Bandlebar has fallen off hilariously hard, and Aatrox is really only good as a specific counter to Lulu Jinx while losing to many of the other top dogs, which means you just have better options to do the same thing. Out with the old and in with the older. Or the brand new. Seriously, that Katarina Leona thing is crazy. Well, everyone, that'll be just about everything for this week's Runeterra report here on Mastering Runeterra. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening until the end. If you have any questions or concerns about the podcast, please feel free to hit me up through the Mastering Runeterra Discord server or personally at Darwintheory 9305. Massive shoutouts to masteringruneterra.com for making this happen, as well as every individual affiliated with the site who helped me piece together the data needed for this podcast. Other special shoutouts go to the folks behind LOR.GG, as well as Likeness website for matchup data, although those watching the video might have noticed it was down this week because somebody played a nasty trick with the bandwidth. You know who you are. Gathering data isn't easy, but when I can cross-reference with such reliable sources, it's a massive help to make sure that I know what I'm talking about is correct. The folks at Mastering Runeterra post quite often, so if you aren't already a regular, I'd highly recommend you swing by and see what's in store. We've got meta tier lists, matchup spreads, and a best of 3 ban helper for you tournament players out there, all updated every few hours to ensure that we have the best data out there. We also have articles posted by top players who know their stuff nearly every single day, so you'll be sure to find something you like no matter where you look. This has been Darwintheory, and on behalf of everyone at Mastering Runeterra, I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in and wish you all a successful week of laddering. I hope to see you back next week as we move past our second hotfix of the last 4 weeks and hope to God that Rise will ever see a single viable deck. Happy climbing.